Sasquatch. You know I had to add this one in there. It's tall, it's hairy, and nearly everyone and their neighbor claims to have witnessed the creature walking through the woods of North America. Dating back further than recorded history, this man-like ape, also commonly known as Bigfoot, is a household legend with nearly 10,000 recorded sightings throughout the United States. I mean, just a quick search and you'll literally find hundreds of photos and articles aiming to prove Bigfoot's existence. Arguably, the most famous evidence we have is Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin's 1967 film where the alleged creature is seen walking along the side of a creek in plain day. And though we still don't know if the authenticity of the photo stacks up, we've also never been truly able to debunk it entirely. Throughout the many stories of alleged sightings, including some saying they were captured and held captive by the creature and others claiming to have spotted the Sasquatch roaming around the woods, many scientists still attribute the sightings to either hoaxes or misidentification of known animals, usually black bears. But what do you think? Are you a believer in Bigfoot, or do you think it's all just one big lie?
In our number 9 spot today we have Takolshi. This creature originated in South Africa and it appears in Zulu mythology. It is said that this creature is quite short, but very frightening. What it lacks in height, it makes up for in a vertical better than Michael Jordan in his prime. Legend has it that this creature likes to jump on people's chests at night while they are sleeping so that it can steal their breath away. Aside from the whole jumping thing, it is said that this creature is also quite fast, and one random fact is that it apparently loves curdled milk, which is disgusting. So while he's stealing your breath, I guess you just have to sit there smelling his hot milk breath. 0 out of 10 trade-off. There is a way to protect yourself against him, and that is by putting your bed on high bricks. This is because if the bed is raised too high, then this malevolent being won't be able to jump up on your chest to complete its breath-stealing work.
Coming in at number 8, we have the Canadian folklore monster, the Ogopogo. If you grew up in the Okanagan Valley of British Columbia, I'm sure you heard a story or two about this mythological sea creature. But could it be that there's more to the Ogopogo than we thought? The myth dates back thousands of years, with Salish indigenous people having passed along the stories about a spirit in the lake, which turned into what we now call the Ogopogo once the white settlers landed and began altering the stories. Described as a serpentine creature with smooth-like skin and a length of up to 50 feet, it's said to move at incredible speeds, using its powerful tail as a propeller to speed through the lake. The first alleged sighting dates back to 1872 by a woman named Susan Allison, who was the first white settler to live in the region, but she's not been the only one to come forward with the so-called evidence. In the 1980s, a tourist agency offered a cash reward for anyone with proof of the beast, and many flocked with pictures and videos trying to claim the reward. Then later in 2008, a photographer by the name of Sean Valoria captured several photos of something peculiar he saw in the water, which he described as having humps and measuring 18 to 20 feet long. After inspection by many local experts, they did confirm that it didn't look anything like a known animal in the lake, which definitely raised a few eyebrows. Although there wasn't enough evidence to confirm the existence of the Ogopogos, from Sean's photo, the fact that there have been hundreds of people over the years coming forward with evidence to prove the legend speaks for itself. I mean, is it really out there? Well, no one's been able to provide enough hard proof. That doesn't mean the BC locals will stop trying anytime soon.
In our number 7 spot today we have the Banshee. The Banshee is Ireland's most well-known dark spirit that roams around the countryside wailing when death is near. The good news about this one is that she does not cause death, but rather her presence is said to foreshadow the arrival of death. She often appears as a woman with long flowing hair wearing a green dress with a grey cloak over top and with eyes that are red for her continuous weeping. There are some, however, who have said she appears as an old woman with dirty, rotting teeth and long fingernails. There is not just one Banshee, however, so it makes sense that there are different appearances. Not all Banshees are evil or hate-filled. There are some who just have strong ties to their family and a desire to continue looking over them. The evil ones, however, are wailing as a form of celebration that the death is about to come. It is said that the wailing of a Banshee may only be able to be heard by the person for whom it is intended. So if you hear this call, I truly hope that you have one of the good ones.
Next up at our number 6 spot is the bunyip. With origins from indigenous Australian folklore dating back to 1812, this monster is said to lurk in the swamps and lagoons while waiting for its human prey to pass so it can pounce. The name bunyip roughly translates to the devil or evil spirit and was certainly viewed as such by locals of the time. These terrifying monsters are most often described as being seal-like and measuring 4 to 6 feet long with a shaggy dark coat and possessing a loud roar that's heard before their vicious attack. In the early 1800s, an English convict, William Buckley, escaped a penal colony and found himself living with the local indigenous people, for which he later wrote a biography detailing his life. In 1852, Buckley wrote that he saw the bunyip while living among the Aboriginal people, and according to his account, the bunyip was an extraordinary amphibious animal with gray feathers covering its back and devoured a woman from his community. As legend states, they apparently preferred women for their prey. Throughout the 1800s, many discovered unusual bones and fossils at the site of swamps and lagoons, only piquing curiosity of this tale further. Then in 1846, one particular obscure skull was put on display at the Australian Museum for 2 days, at which time hundreds of alleged bunyip sightings came out of the woodworks, including a group of men who claimed to have seen a stranger disappear while they were on a boat only a yard away from them. So what do you say? Are you feeling brave enough to test out the swamps of Australia to find out for yourself?
In our number 5 spot today, we have La Llorona. The weeping woman is actually named Maria, and she is from Mexico. She has long black hair and is known for her greedy heart. When she was alive, the man she loved would not love her back, and the legend says that because of this, she did some very horrible things. Realizing the terrible things she did in her fit of rage, she ended up throwing herself into the ocean. After her passing, because of her sins, heaven would not allow her in, and instead she was condemned to wander the world in eternal grief. When people see her, she is usually walking, wearing all white and soaking wet. Legend says that sometimes she snatches people up as she mistakes them for her own children. It is said that she can be summoned by going into the bathroom, turning all of the lights out, and splashing water on the mirror before you say her name 3 times. Try it if you dare.
Coming in at number 4, the Kraken. The subject of many a superstitious sailor, this creature originated from Scandinavian folklore and is depicted as an aggressive, cephalopod-like creature capable of destroying entire ships and dragging sailors to their doom. Legends say the creature could devour a whole ship and its crew in its entirety, and if that didn't work, it would swim round the ship in circles to create a whirlpool, sucking the ship down into the deep, dark depths of the sea. Though it seems like a death sentence, many sailors would take the risk and approach the beast, as it said huge schools of fish would surround the creature, and I guess they wanted to take their chances. In 18th century, scientists linked this myth to reality by including the Kraken among the cephalopod mollusks in the first edition of Systema Naturae, and it would only be further linked to reality when in 1853 a giant cephalopod was found stranded on a Norwegian beach. After 150 years of research into giant squids and octopi, it's still unclear whether the legend of the Kraken, as is told, was entirely true, but we know for certain that giant squids swim among us every day. And I mean, what do we really know about what lies deep, deep down in the depths of the ocean?
In our number 3 spot today, we have the Papabawa. This evil creature is found stalking the Tanzanian island of Pemba and is one of those creepy beings that has the ability to shapeshift. Sometimes seen as a bat and sometimes seen in human form, the creature prefers to come out at night, and anyone is a target, although it definitely prefers men. The legend of the Papabawa has had people on the island scared since the origins of the story, especially a few years ago when there was actually a real-life string of attacks on men in the area, which were being tied to this demon. The important part of this one is that those who encounter the evil creature must tell others and spread the word. If they fail to do this, the Papabawa will continue to attack, and we all know that that is just not good. During times when people are worried about being attacked by this creature, many people can be seen sitting outside of their homes at night, often huddled around an open fire with their friends and family, as when people are in their homes sleeping is when the creature most likes to attack.
In the number 2 spot, we have the truly terrifying chupacabra. Derived mainly from Puerto Rico and Mexico, the chupacabra literally translates to goat sucker. This mythical legend is reported to attack and drink the blood of livestock. Oddly, it seems like no no one can land on a unifying description, with many in Puerto Rico saying it resembles a more reptilian-like creature the size of a small bear with prominent spines from head to tail. Others alleged sightings from the southwest United States have depicted it as more dog-like. The legend began back in 1975 when a small Puerto Rican town by the name of Mocha experienced a devastating loss of their town livestock, finding them drained of their blood by several small circular incisions. Originally, the town suspected the horrors to be linked to a satanic cult, but a few years later in 1995, another 8 sheep were found to have the same fate. To make matters worse, a few months later, a woman named Madeline Tolentino claims to have witnessed the creature, where it would later be found that another 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed, with these animals dropping left, right, and center. It's no wonder locals started suspecting the culprit to be the legendary chupacabra. But what say you? A satanic cult or the work of a blood-sucking creature?
In our number 1 spot today we have La Ciguapa. The legend of the Ciguapa comes from the Dominican Republic, and it is a group of small feral women who inhabit the mountainous areas. They wait in the shadows, lurking around, waiting to capture lonely men. They have extremely long hair that covers their small, thin bodies, and they also have dark blue skin and backwards feet. They are nocturnal creatures, and because of their feet, it is hard to track exactly which way they are going, if tracking their footprints. Not only do they capture the men in order to take their lives, but it is also said that if you look one in the eye, you'll be bewitched. Legend says that the only way to defeat one of these creatures is to capture them by tracking them at night, during a full moon, and with a black and white dog with an extra toe. That is definitely one of the most specific things I've ever heard, but that is what the legend says, and I'm not trying to take any kind of chances here.
Off with an intense one now at number 10 with the sacrificial beggar child. What a title to start with. The story goes like this. In the town of Dallin there was once a horrible disease that plagued the people there. They were desperate and became convinced their town was cursed. At one point they almost burnt the whole town down to the ground, hoping they could start again from scratch. Then one day an old man from Finland visited. A wise old sage was with him. They said they knew how to stop the plague. The sage told them that only a sacrifice would save them. They needed to bury a living being in the ground. At first they buried a rooster alive in the center of the town, but nothing changed. The plague just continued. Then they did the same to a goat. This also failed. Finally they decided the only sacrifice worthy enough would be a human being. They chose a small orphan boy and lured him to a hole with some bread. As soon as he was in there, they began piling dirt on him. They didn't stop until he was buried completely. Only his muffled screams could be heard. The plague didn't stop, only getting worse. The villagers claimed they could still hear his cries as they all continued to die. Other towns have reported hearing the same cries, almost as if his death has become an eternal warning against the horrors of human sacrifice. Next up at number 9 now we have the evil one and Kitta Grau. One day a girl named Kitta Grau met the devil. She recognized him and said, "Where have you been, old man?" "Well," said the devil, "I have been out on the farmstead where the newly wedded couple live. This is the 3rd time I have tried to break them up, but they think so much of each other that it's impossible." Kitta scoffed, "You sound stupid. I could have done that the first time I went there. If you can do it, I will give you a splendid pair of shoes," said the devil. Kitta accepted and headed out to the farmstead. There she found the woman home alone. Her husband had gone out to the forest. Kitta told her that she had a splendid husband. "That is the truth," the woman replied, "for he grants my every wish before it is spoken." Kitta smiled. "Take my word though, there is still a bit of deceit in him. He has a pair of long hairs under his chin. If you can cut them off in his sleep, then he will have no malice in him at all." The woman said, "Well, if you think that will help, I'll do it during his afternoon nap." Then Kitta went out to the forest to see the husband. "You really have a very good wife," she said. "She could be no better," the husband replied. "Well, you might be wrong," said Kitta. "When you come home, be on your guard, for when you take your afternoon nap, she will try to cut your throat." The husband didn't really believe her, but later that day, during his nap, his wife came up softly behind him and took hold of his chin with one hand, razor in the other. He jumped up and flew into a rage. "You want to murder me?" he cried. From that day on, there was no peace in the house. Kitta went to get her shoes from the devil as promised, but he was so afraid of her, he passed them on a pole from the other side of the river. "You are ever so much worse than I am," the devil told Kitta Grau. Many Swedes have heard the tales of this woman who bested the devil, who may be more evil than him, and who still wanders the land to this day. At number 8 now we have the Naken. According to ancient Swedish folklore, the Naken is a supernatural man who lives in seas, lakes, streams, rivers, every body of water imaginable. He is inescapable, which is scary as his only mission in the world is to drown people. He is said to do this by enchanting them with his incredible fiddle playing. When people hear the music coming from the water, they helplessly walk towards it. They walk into the water and keep going, further and further, chasing the music until they are submerged by the water and drown. Those who have seen him say the Naken wears no clothes when he plays, hence the name, which means naked. He has long brown hair with seagrass in it. He also looks very sad, like something is torturing him forever. Legend says the reason he lurks in the waters and draws people into their deaths is that he is simply lonely. Those who tell the Naken story often say it was more common to hear him in the past, but some still say they hear his fiddle by pools of water on dark nights with a bright full moon. Next up at number 7 now we have the Dragon. A number of Scandinavian countries are home to the legend of the Dragon, and Sweden is one of them. They are said to be evil ghost spirits with an eternal connection to water. In life they were sailors or fishermen who lost their lives at sea. Now they are doomed to haunt the waves forever. The curse changes them. The Dragon are always described as being huge in size and covered from head to toe in seaweed. They are only ever seen after dark during stormy seas, always rowing the remains of whatever broken boat they died in. Quite often sailors hear the Dragon before they see them. The creatures are said to let out a piercing cry as they row towards their victims, somewhere between a deathly howl of pain and a cackle of pleasure. Faced with such terrifying creatures, many sailors report the only way of escaping a Dragon is reaching the shore before it. Of course, a Dragon knows this too and will try and drag them down to the depths of the sea before that. Even if they succeed, there have been stories of the Dragon stepping ashore to continue their pursuit. Truth be told, there seems to be no limit to what this creature will do to get the kill it desires. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Lindworm. In a number of Scandinavian countries, including Sweden, the Lindworm is an old, fabled creature. Some still speak its name. The Lindworm is described as a giant, limbless serpent. It has a serpentine body, a dragon-like head, scaled or reptilian skin, and 2 clawed arms on the upper body. They are often associated with pestilence, eating cattle, and human bodies, sometimes even invading churchyards and eating the dead from cemeteries. Their sighting is thought to be an exceptional sign of good luck. Their skin was believed to greatly increase a person's knowledge about nature and medicine. For centuries there have been stories of people fighting the Lindworms. There was even the story of the King Lindworm. It was born to a queen who was told the only way she could have children was to eat 2 onions. However, one of them wasn't peeled, which caused one of her twin boys to become the fearsome King Lindworm. Jumping forward now for our number 5, and we have the Clarion Grand Hotel. This building is located in Helsingborg and it's home to a number of creepy tales. People will tell you to stay away from the 5th floor and room 585. Guests who have stayed in this room have reported feeling watched, they felt icy drafts that passed through them, or even being pushed out of bed in the middle of the night. It's believed that just one ghost is responsible for all of these spooky goings on. In life, she was a former mistress who was murdered by a married couple in the 1920s when the wife discovered what her husband had been doing. In a desperate attempt to save their marriage, they decided to bump off the other woman, who then disappeared without a trace. All this happened in the 1920s, not long after the hotel was built. Some people believe that the building and the ghost will forever be intertwined, that she has found her home at the hotel, and you're the one who's invading it. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Christmas ghosts. The story goes like this. A woman was preparing to head to church for midnight Christmas mass. She and her friend decided to get some sleep before they went. The woman got up when she thought she heard her friend saying it was time to leave. She grabbed some bread that was in the shape of the cross to eat later on. On the way to the church, she was stopped by a couple of evil witches who wanted to kill her. They couldn't approach her though because of the cross she was carrying. The woman was totally unaware of all of this, however, and made her way into the church. Inside, she sat down and heard something that sent chills down her spine. A voice in her head told her that he was her godfather and that someone wanted to kill her, but she would be spared. This was shocking. The woman spun around in a panic and suddenly saw that everyone in the church was headless. She fled the scene as ghostly figures tried to grab her. They only managed to take her veil though, and the woman escaped. When she returned to retrieve the veil, she found that the ghost had shredded it to bits and scattered the pieces among the graves outside the church. There was no doubt in her mind that they would have done the exact same thing to her if she had been caught. Alright, next up at number 3 now, we have the Blåa Jungfrun. This is the name of a Swedish island in the Baltic Sea. Its name literally translates to the Blue Maiden, and it has a historical link to the supernatural. Since ancient times, locals have regarded this as an evil place, steeped in dark magic. The name Blue Maiden was intentionally nicer than what people thought of it. That's because sailors wanted to appease the evil spirits who lived there, and they thought a nice name would do that. According to a widespread belief dating back to the 16th century, witches met there every Holy Thursday. People said that those who go there will never return, at least not in the same way they arrived. The beaches and stone labyrinths have many smooth stones which are illegal to remove from the island. Some say this is because of the island's status as a national park. Others claim that people will suffer endless bad luck until the stones are returned. The nearby town has stones from former visitors to the island, often with an accompanying letter describing the misfortunes and disasters which had happened to them since removing these cursed stones. Next up at number 2 now, we have the Kraken. For millennia, the people of Sweden joined many cultures in their belief of the mighty Kraken, the most fearsome creature of the seas. It's been described as a mile-wide octopus or squid-like creature that is often mistaken for an island. It was said that only 2 existed because any more and there would have not been enough food in the oceans for them. Although it mostly fed on fish, the Kraken was never known to say no to human flesh. Legend says that the Kraken could devour a ship's entire crew in one go. If it didn't want to eat but simply kill the sailors, it would send one of its massive tentacles slamming down onto the ship's deck, snapping it clean in half and dooming any sailors who hadn't already been killed. Some people like to imagine that the Kraken never really disappeared, it just sunk to the bottom of the ocean, waiting for the right time to return to the surface and assert its dominance over us. And finally, number 1 now, we have the trolls. Sweden has been no stranger to reports of trolls over the centuries. In recent years, there was a case involving a woman referred to as SM93. She was a farmer in a remote area of Sweden who noticed that her cows had been let outside one night. She then noticed all of her tools and containers were going missing. One night, the horses snorting in the stable woke her up. She found them outside of their paddock. When she got to them, she looked up to see what's been reported as a troll. It stood about 6'3" tall with incredibly long, thin and muscular legs. Its head was oblong and it had big ears high up on its head. The creature was greyish brown in colour and looked dirty and veined. Its torso was covered in fur, but not the arms or the legs. As the creature noticed her, it grunted, flapped its ears and leapt away, running quickly into the woods from where it came. No sooner had that happened when she turned around to see her stable was on fire. The fire department determined it was an electrical cable to blame. A few months later, a neighbour who had previously found his cows let out at night had his barn burnt down too. Again, the cows had all been released, so the only thing that was damaged was the building. The cause of the fire was determined to be arson and a farm worker was convicted. People are convinced that the trolls are real, mysterious, creepy looking, but seemingly caring for humans, or at least the animals they keep. What do you guys think? The Obra River monster. The Obra River in West Poland is picturesque on the surface. It's a popular place for canoeing and kayaking. However, under the surface there lies a creepy urban legend. They say a monster lies down there and has done for generations. Over the years, many witnesses have reported seeing a giant snake-like creature in the lakes connected to the river. They say they've seen it surface to attack ducks, swans and even small dogs, which are often dragged underwater, never to be seen again. Others say they've seen the snake approach boats and try its luck with them, showing it isn't even afraid of us humans. It's been compared to the Loch Ness monster, with some people saying that it's actually the last survivor of an ancient reptilian creature. Of course, that would mean that it would have to be near enough immortal by this point, so perhaps there isn't just one, but a number of different Obra monsters, all lurking below the waters, waiting until their numbers are strong enough to return to the surface. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Rusalka. This is a Polish tree spirit, traditionally thought to inhabit the woods and lakes of western Poland. Rusalka were thought to be the spirits of murdered girls. They yearn for continued existence, but for that they need the energy of the living. So, at certain times of the year, they will climb out of their lakes and sit on the branches of willow and birch trees. There, they wait for a man. He will become infatuated with the undead temptress and follow her back into into the water. She will then entangle him with her long hair and pull him to the bottom to drown. In the olden days, it was said that the rusalka really didn't like women, probably out of jealousy. Women would hang scarves and linen in the forest to appease the rusalka. If you're planning a trip to Poland and want to avoid these, they are said to become most dangerous around early June, especially during a time known as Rusalka Week, where the spirits leave the woods and cause crop damage, illness and death across the land. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the striga. This is a female creature who feeds on human blood. Every country we've looked at seems to have a vampire legend. This is Poland's. The striga's origin is connected to the belief of duality of the souls. A common explanation is that most of the time humans are born with a single soul. I mean, how could they not? Right? Well, apparently sometimes, very rarely, a person is born with two. They may live a totally normal life, but when they die, only one soul leaves the body. The second gets trapped inside the body, keeping it alive in an undead sort of way, more vampire than human. They are now a striga, bound to living between the spheres of life and death until the second soul leaves too. At first, they may look quite human, but as time goes on, they change. They may start out getting grey or blue skin. Then their features become bird-like. They grow claws, bird eyes, and have feathers growing off their back. During the day, they sleep in their own graves and then come out at night for a hunt. They need human blood to survive and will suck it out of their victims while eating their entrails. I know. Apparently, you can tell if someone is going to turn into a striga if they are born with an extra appendage of sorts, 2 rows of teeth, 2 hearts, or just any other anomaly like that. Just warning you all. Next up at number 7 now, we have the ogniki. These are demons which guard the graves where forgotten treasures are hidden. In life, they used to be humans, but only a specific kind of person becomes an ogniki. It's not necessarily evil people, but deceitful ones, people who are fraudulent or unjust to others. The ogniki live in marshes and swamps. They are hostile to people. If lost wanderers reach the areas haunted by the ogniki, they are led into the most dangerous part of that swamp and drowned in a pool of slime. People are drawn to them by the lights they leave flickering over the swamps. They are said to be hypnotic in nature, pulling them in. The lights sometimes appear as a pair of hands holding either a candle or an indescribable light source. Either way, the light will always be where the treasure is not. You see, the ogniki are greedy spirits who try and draw humans away from the treasure they are protecting. This is a reflection of the greed they had in life. Next up at number 6 now, we have the zmori. These are evil, half-demonic creatures that feed off human life force. But there is a catch. They can't actually kill their own prey directly. Polish mythology describes them as the wandering souls of those living people who were lost in a deep sleep state or suffering from a severe disease. The souls left the body as it began to fail. Now they remain between the world of the living and the world of the dead. They enter people's houses at night, seeking the vital human energy they need. They sit on people's legs or chests as they sleep, causing sleep paralysis or breathing problems. That's when they feed on your life force. The zmori may be spirit-like, but they are more physical than ghosts. It's said that they can't actually pass through physical objects like doors or walls, but they don't really need to though. The zmori can take on any form they like. They can become as flat as a pancake to slide under your door, or as thin as a hair to slide right through your lock. They prefer to stay invisible, but some can take the form of a human where they would have a semi-transparent body. Attacking humans is their ultimate goal, but they will also go for animals too. They say the zmori like horses for their strength. You can tell a horse has been visited by one because it will be sweating and visibly exhausted in the morning. If you ever have a morning like that, maybe you have been visited too. Next up at number 5 now, we have the bogniki. These are female personifications of the wild forces of nature in old Polish mythology. They are seen as demons that only have 2 approaches to us humans, neutral or hostile. There are no friendly ones. They attack humans. Specifically, they attack women during childbirth. That's right, when a woman is at perhaps her most vulnerable point, giving birth to a human life after hours of labor and 9 months of carrying, that's when the bogniki attack them. That gives you guys an idea of the moral compass of these creatures. They replace the newborns with changelings. They look like humans, but they are actually infant bognikis. Although they need and prey on us, they aren't usually found in towns or cities, preferring instead to dwell in swamps, lakes, rivers, forests, woods, and mountains. Some say the bogniki are the spirits of women who died in childbirth, committed suicide, or even murdered a child. They say that witches can summon bogniki and pray to them to get help. If witches pray to you, you're probably not not a good thing. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Polondicha. They are said to be the demons of young women who died before, during, or shortly after their wedding. They are the lost souls of maidens who were not able to have the happy marriage they wanted because death snatched it away from them. They are said to appear around noon on the hottest days of summer, wandering in the fields of golden crops. Now if you see them from a distance, they may look pretty normal. Beautiful women, dressed in blinding white clothes, their hair loose and sometimes wearing a flower crown. However, when you look closer, you can see that something is not right. Their teeth look like steel, they have a swollen tongue and their skin looks rotten and burned. They hold a sickle and ambush people from behind. They may ask riddles or questions for their own amusement, but if you fail to appease them, they will attack. The victim is tortured until they are maimed or even killed. The most common form of death is by the heat that they radiate with. Meeting one can cause heavy headaches, heartaches, paralysis or loss of consciousness. Parents often fear their children who play alone in crop fields will be kidnapped by them or permanently blinded. Oh, and she often appears with whirlwinds and 7 black dogs accompanying her. Our descriptions continue, and trust me, none of them get any nicer. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Bieda. This is a demon whose name translates to poverty. It's quite a fitting name for this immortal being that brings misfortune, misery and grief to everyone who's near her. She is tall and lean, described as twig-like and covered in old rags. She wanders the earth looking to feed on a very specific source of nourishment, human happiness and luck, kind of like a dementor. If you've been lacking some of those in your life recently, perhaps you have a Bieda nearby. When she finds a target, she settles down in a nearby house. You'll know that this has happened by a series of disasters or general troubles occurring in your family. She can turn herself into any object or animal. That makes her a lot more difficult to look out for. Basically, she could be anything new in the environment. People say to watch out for birds like sparrows or swallows who have built their nests under the roof but don't seem to be laying any eggs like normal birds, or perhaps lone mouses who seem to be smarter than cats. Bieda is an immortal being and cannot be killed. If you try and burn or sink the object that she turns into, she will escape, let out a loud screech and then turn into a completely different object, one that is even harder to find. They've been doing this for hundreds or thousands of years, which means the object they hide as are now probably almost invisible to humans. Perhaps one of them is in the room with you right now. Have you noticed anything new? Next up at number 2 now, we have the Biali Zimni Ludzi. In English, they are called the White Cold People. They are perhaps the most mysterious creatures on this list. They are basically an illness in human form. They are tiny, covered in unhealthy looking skin, and scuttle around in a feverish insect kind of way. They can be the size of your hand or as small as the head of a pin. They are always bad omens, able to haunt and prey on people. They live in forests and swamps and love to ambush travelers from a hiding place in a puddle by the side of a road. Once they have selected you as a target, they will hide in your clothes and wait for you to fall asleep. Then, very quietly, they will climb onto your face and enter your body through your mouth or your nose. Once they're in your respiratory system, they will infect you with various hard to cure illnesses. When you wake up, the first sign of a visit will be a high fever. It was thought that to cure this, the victims were forced to drink strong spirits mixed with powdered dried eyes of a crayfish or eat a stalk from an old broom on a slice of bread and butter. Don't ask me why, I didn't make the rules. Another curing ritual involved drilling a deep hole in a tree trunk, breathing through it and then clogging the hole with a wooden stake. This was supposed to imprison the exhaled demons inside the tree trunk. They always find a way to get out again. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Chernobog. We've undoubtedly saved the best till last with this one. Some say the Chernobog is the king of monsters, others call him the Black God, some simply say he is the devil. I'm sure you can already see what kind of being you're dealing with here. He is the source of all evil in the world and enjoys nothing more than stealing and devouring souls. This lord of hatred causes calamity and disaster, bringing bad luck and misfortune wherever he turns. Unlike a lot of creatures we've talked about on this list, the Chernobog doesn't have any real desire or motive to do the evil things he does. He just loves his spot as the most despicable creature in the world. You'd think that with such a powerful and malevolent being, there would be a lot of literature about him, but relatively speaking, there isn't. It's almost as if people in bygone eras were scared to even mention him in writing. All we have are shadows, rumors, and clues to his truly terrible nature. In the past, ancient Slavic people used to spit curses into their bowls at feasts in the hope of keeping the Chernobog at bay, but it was only a hope. for true evil is a difficult thing to stop.
Right, coming in at number 10 we have El Somberon. What is a myth or a legend video without the boogeyman? Nothing, that's what. El Somberon is a baffling one really. He's like a lusty boogeyman with a weird hair obsession. Bald? No worries. Luscious locks? Watch out. El Somberon is said to wear a big black hat that covers the majority of his face. He's a short man with big eyes that poke out from behind a silver guitar that he'll use to serenade ladies with. You'll know when he's been around as you may find horses with curiously braided tails or a plait in a girl's hair that she doesn't remember placing herself. One tale says that he stood outside on the balcony of a beautiful woman with long hair. On hearing his music, she became mesmerized by him. He returned to her balcony night after night to the point where the girl actually stopped eating and sleeping. Her parents were worried about her, so they cut off her hair, which immediately made El Somberon lose interest. So gutted, although honestly, probably for the best. A gal needs some dinner. If I had to choose between luscious hair and having a good taco, like, give me the food. Another type of boogeyman is coming in at number 9. This one is less about the hair and more about the drinking the blood of children, so swings and roundabouts really, right? That's right, we have the legend of El Cuco. It is thought that this particular Mexican myth was brought over from Spain in the colonial era. El Cuco in life was a man suffering with tuberculosis, the disease that offed Santin in Moulin Rouge, and honestly, I'm never gonna get over that. Tuberculosis basically was a huge killer. These days, it actually still is an issue in Mexico, however it is curable, thank goodness. In the era of El Cuco though, a cure was a long way off. The legend goes that El Cuco met with a curandero, a traditional healer. She told the man that the only way to cure the disease was to drink the blood of a child and then rub their fat on his chest. Gnarly. So, diligently, El Cuco did this, having no qualms about kidnapping and murdering a 7-year-old boy. What a savage. These days, El Cuco is said to roam the streets looking for misbehaving children to kill to cure his ailments. A modern day myth coming in at number 8, we have El Chupacabra. Is a classic cryptid. A chupacabra is a legendary creature in folklore, a blood-sucking animal vampire hybrid. Its name literally translates to goat sucker. Now the legend of El Chupacabra is most popular in Puerto Rico, northern Mexico and the border states of the USA. It became most prevalent however in modern times. In 1996, following an incident in Puerto Rico, the chupacabra allegedly began killing goats in the Mexican countryside. Now I found a mid-90s article on CNN which quotes a Mexican woman. She said, "It's horrible because we don't know what it is. I don't think it's a coyote or a dog like officials say because a dog can't kill 10 goats with a single blow." To this day, some 25 years later, people still believe that a vampire goat sucker was behind the killings. Often stray hairless dogs in Mexico are mistaken as the chupacabra, which adds fuel to the myth's fire. Coming into number 7, we have the owls.
Roll after roll of gibberish, and all of a sudden, the owls are not what they seem.
Oh, I love a good owl, I really do. I love how evil they look and like, you're not gonna be messing with no owl, are you? Not in Mexico anyway. La Lechuza is a woman by day and an owl by night. There are a lot of strands to the myth, but it is generally agreed upon that the woman has been wronged in some way and is looking to seek revenge. Some say that the Lechuza snatches children in her talons because her own child was killed by angry villagers for a crime that they did not commit. Others say that her child was killed by a drunkard, and so now the shape-shifting owl exacts revenge by perching on the rooftops of bars, waiting until closing time to attack drinkers stumbling out into the night. Others think that the owl is simply a familiar of a witch. Either way, the owls are bad news bears. There have been gigantic bird sightings happening over northern Mexico, especially in Chihuahua and Tamaulipas and the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. These have been going on for centuries, and a lot of people think that it is the La Lechuza looking for revenge. In general, Mexicans are traditionally distrusting of owls. Coming in at number 6, we have La Lorna. This is actually a very sad and enduring Mexican myth and legend. La Lorna is a wailing ghost that is said to bring misfortune or even death if you hear her cries, rather like the banshee in Irish folklore. The story behind the legend is one of a woman named Maria who is raised in a small rural village. Quite the beauty, she piqued the attention of a passing nobleman who married her and whisked her away from her family to a house outside of the village where she had 2 children. Unfortunately for her though, her husband would travel a lot, and when he returned he seemed changed, only to care about their sons, and seemingly was disinterested in her. One day, he returned with another woman, which drove Maria to insanity, which I totally get, like, get her out. Her husband bid farewell to his sons and ignored his wife, leaving with the other woman. Maria, in utter despair, threw her 2 children in a river. Upon realizing what she'd done, she tried to save them, but they'd been swept away and drowned. She then killed herself and pleaded at the gates of heaven to be reunited with her sons, but the gatekeepers told her that she must find them first. She now is stuck in purgatory as a ghost, always looking for her children. It is said that if she finds lost children at night, she drowns them, hoping they contain the souls of her lost sons. If you hear wailing or crying near a body of water at night, you are to run in the opposite direction for fear of being drowned or meeting the bad luck associated with La Lorna. Coming into number 5, we have El Muerto, the headless bandit. The El Muerto tale is truly terrifying. I mean, what isn't to be afraid of? It comes in the form of a headless ghost, which, This myth, or we hope myth anyway, actually comes from the US border with Mexico, dating back to the gold rush era. Now, a lot of people were looking around the border regions for gold. On top of that, the US-Mexico border was hotly contested around that time, with an area of no man's land between the two countries. In this area, bandits were rife, and Texas Rangers were around to keep them in check because America! One ranger, William Bigfoot Wallace, wanted to teach the bandits a lesson after one persistent criminal, known simply as Vidal, stole a bunch of Mustang horses. When he was caught, Bigfoot Wallace and his ranger friends chopped off Vidal's head, sat his body on a horse, attached his hands to the reins, and strung his head to the saddle. Crikey. This was supposed to teach the would-be bandits a lesson not to mess with the Texans, but some poor sod had to deal with finding the horse and its deceased cargo too, which is like a double blow. Despite eventually being taken down from the horse, legend has it that Mexican Vidal rides through the valley of Rio Grande today, with his ghost being dubbed El Muerto, scaring Americans everywhere they are, like, nay. Coming in at number 4, we have the legend of the Crystal Skulls. Crystal Skulls, it truly is a great Mexican mystery. I also love starting things with don't I? Like, Many curious crystal skulls have been found across ruin and burial sites in Mexico, sparking intrigue. There is a myth about the skulls that seems to say that after the 13th has been discovered, mankind will unlock the secrets of the earth and begin a new age. Now, this date was predicted by the Mayans to be in 2012, but we haven't got there yet. Better get looking for more skulls. Myths aside, the skulls are still an enigma due to their intricate crystal work, which would have been exceptionally complex and intricate for the time in which they were created. Coming into number 3, we have the eclipse. Pregnant mamas, watch out. In Mexican folklore, it is said that if a pregnant woman is exposed outdoors during a solar eclipse, her baby will be born with a cleft lip or cleft palate, which is pretty bizarre. So like, why though? Well, it seems that the belief dates back to the Aztec eras, when the best explanation for an eclipse was that a bite had been taken from the moon, possibly by some kind of wolf god. For them it made sense that if a bite could be taken from the moon, a bite could be taken from an unborn child in a womb. Should the mother view the eclipse anyway. So to protect her, she would have an obsidian knife placed on her belly before she went out. Now these days the tradition and beliefs are upheld, and a woman tends to take a metal key or safety pin out for protection at night in the event of an eclipse. But honestly, let's be like totally fair, eclipses are pretty rare, they don't happen that often, so I wouldn't be too worried, she says. Coming into number 2, we have the Day of the Dead. Mexicans kind of have a macabre humour when it comes to death, and I can get on board with that, I truly can. Death is coming for us anyway, so we may as well dress it up in a floral hat and have a good time playing with it, right? Rather than fearing for it all of our lives. Party with death? Anyone? Is anyone watching from Mexico? Because like, hello, tell me more about this. The Day of the Dead is a big party in Mexico. It centers on La Calavera Catrina, a female skeleton wearing a fancy hat that's basically the personification of death. She stems back to the Aztec mythology of the Queen of Mictlan, who keeps watch over the bones of the dead and presides over festivals celebrating the afterlife. Traditionally, Mexicans believe that a person has to get through 9 challenges to reach the afterlife, and family members will provide them with food and water throughout this difficult journey. On the Day of the Dead, it is believed that the barrier between the spirit world and the real world dissolves. During this time, the souls of the dead awaken and return to the living world to feast and drink and dance and play music with their loved ones. I actually really kind of love that. It's kind of like a fun day of remembrance without crying and, you know, tequila and sombreros. Okay, we have a crazy and enduring story to end off this list. At number 1, we have The Tale of the Travelling Soldier. soldier. The transported soldier legend has it that in 1593, a soldier from the Philippines transported from Manila straight to Mexico City in their sleep. What? Gil Perez was said to have nodded off as he leaned against the governor's palace wall on October 24th, 1593. Now if that date rings a bell, you're about to hear why. You can't blame him for nodding off. He had a very long night because the governor had just been assassinated. He was standing guard as a new leader was being appointed and he drifted off. As he slept though, curiously, he woke up in Mexico City, and I'm not sure if you've looked at a map recently, but that is very far away, like other side of the world away. Perez was questioned by officials in Mexico who found him. They threw him in jail after he told them that he'd simply just woken up thousands of miles from where he was supposed to be. Suspicious, honestly, I get it. Eventually, when a passenger ship from Manila turned up in Mexico City months later, crews were able to confirm Perez's story about the governor's assassination and the soldier's disappearance. So like, WTF? Like teleportation? Alien abduction? Or just good old-fashioned myth? Let me know what you think.
Starting us off with number 10 is the Wild Hunt, and this one is borderline ancient. The first account of the Wild Hunt was back in 1127 when a historical document revealed this. Many men both saw and heard a great number of huntsmen hunting. The huntsmen were black, huge and hideous, and rode on black horses and on black he-goats, and their hounds were jet black with eyes like saucers and horrible, end quote. Apparently the huntsmen were sinners while they were alive, and so the nightly exercise was just part of their punishment, and if them on their own isn't scary enough, they were also accompanied by demons. Lone travelers would get taken by the whole group of them and dragged to the literal pits of hell, which I'm not here for, by the way. I don't know about you personally, but personally that's not my vibe. Personally. I don't speak for everyone. Coming in at number 9 is Red Cap. So a bit of a history lesson for you. England and Scotland were at war for far too long back in the day, and that made the Anglo-Scottish border a dangerous place to be. Raiders from both countries would go and commit crimes on the other side of the border and come back and not be punished for it. And with horrible people, there are also horrible creatures. Redcap was an evil creature that took the form of an old man with iron shoes. He had long pointed teeth, and you already know that doesn't sit well with me, red eyes, talon-like fingers, and long hair. And the cherry on top was his red hat. Redcap would ravage all the abandoned castles along the border, hunting for bodies left behind from the war, and use their blood to dye his cap. And if he didn't find any bodies, he'd just wait around and kill an unlucky passerby. Apparently the only way to defeat him is to either brandish a crucifix or recite biblical scripture, after which he should scream and disappear into a ball of fire, and if he doesn't, well, don't quote me on that. No cap. I had to do it. Come on, this is me, I had to do it. Chris is like, yeah. At number 8, we have the Vampires of Burton-on-Trent. No folklore video is ever complete without the mention of some kind of vampires or another. According to an old Anglo-Saxon chronicle, there were 2 peasants in Burton-on-Trent that had died, yet were seen walking around town with their coffins on their backs. They would knock on people's doors, calling out their names, and whoever was called upon would very quickly fall sick and die. Now, suspicious, the villagers decided to open up the coffins of the 2 men to see the corpses were completely undecayed and their mouths were covered with cloths drenched in blood. Being like, absolutely not, the villagers then beheaded the corpses, cut their hearts out, and burned the bodies. Good going, guys, I would have done the same. 2 black birds were seen emerging from the fire, and after that point the men were never seen again. I honestly feel like Twilight and the Vampire Diaries has really ruined vampires for me. I always have to remind myself they're not like Edward Cullen or the Salvatore brothers, they're like this. Don't fall in love with them. It's not cute. Let's not romanticize vampires. Let's cancel that culture right now. Starting now. Filling on our 7th slot is Cutty Dyer. Now the legend of Cutty Dyer goes way back to at least 1879. That's the first time this creature was talked about in local publications, and everyone had already been it for a while. This creature is said to be an ogre or a water sprite that stalked the stream of the River Yo or Ashburn, depending on the version of the story that you hear. The legend originated in the town of Ashburton, where he supposedly lived under the King's Bridge. Isn't it usually trolls that live under the bridge? What's going on? Cutty Dyer would wait around stalking children and any drunkards that came by. He'd then pounce on them, drowning them and then gorging on their blood. That's appetizing. Parents used to tell his story to their kids, kind of like an ode to the boogeyman, so they'd stay away from the river. 2 people have even said to have witnessed him standing waist deep in the water, bearing shark teeth and bright glowing red eyes. Now at number 6 is Spring-Heeled Jack. Good old Jack terrorized Victorian Britain, namely London, from the 1830s onwards. First mentioned back in 1810, 3 women reported being attacked by a tall figure wearing a skin-tight black suit, long fingers, red eyes, and metal claws. Apparently he would breathe blue fire into their faces, not burning them, but paralyzing them. A fear was ripe around the city, everyone was bricks, and rightfully so. Many groups even set out to find and kill Jack, but he was never caught. As he gained popularity, his attacks became few and far between, because mans like to keep it low-key, you know how it is. Keep it on the down low, on the DL. Like me, I'm a very low-key person. Ha! Not. Coming in at number 5 is the Guy Trash. Now already the countryside of Yorkshire is pretty much deserted. The hills have a bunch of footpaths around them that people haven't used in centuries. So because of that and the major lack of signage, it's almost inevitable that one would get lost if travelling the area. The Guy Trash was said to be the most dangerous spirit to live in Yorkshire, and here I'm like, damn, there's more than one spirit? No. Looks wise, it could appear as a black horse or dog or mule with fiery red eyes. It would stalk the footpaths looking for lost travellers and would then lead them further astray, so they'd be even more screwed. Once the traveller was lost with no hope, the Guy Trash would either disappear, leaving them for dead in the dark, or it'd attack them, killing them instantly. At number 4 is the Mermaid of Galloway. First mentioned back in 1810, this tale goes as follows. The Mermaid of Galloway used to live in a breathtaking burn or watercourse, and every night she would sit on a rock and locals would come to her seeking medical advice. Everything was all rainbows and butterflies, but one particular religious woman thought the mermaid was the work of the devil. She ended up pushing the mermaid's rock back into the water, and so when the mermaid appeared the next day, she was so distraught due to the lack of seat. She cried out saying, "You may look to your empty cradle and I'll look to my stain." She said more than that, but it's all in Old English and I didn't even understand it, and I figured you guys wouldn't either, and it simply wasn't relevant. The next day, the religious woman's baby was found dead in its cradle, and the mermaid was never seen again. I mean, never take a woman's seat. You know what they say. No one says that, but I do. Filling our number 3 slot is the Kelpie and the 9 Children. Reverend John Gregerson Campbell was the first person to recount the story in his book Superstitions of the Highlands and Islands of Scotland back in 1900. Legend has it a group of 9 children were roaming around Lochaber in the Scottish Highlands when they came across a relatively massive, friendly horse. This horse was so big that it had room for all 9 kids to sit on its back, and as soon as they did, the horse galloped off with the kids fearing for their lives. They wanted to jump off but were magically stuck to the horse, and only one of the kids survived because he had a pocket knife in his bag. He cut off his finger that was attached to the horse's mane and watched it dive into a lock, taking its damned cargo with it. None of the kids were seen again, but the following day, guts and other organs were seen floating on the surface of the water. Now at number 2 is the Witch Hare of Cleveland. Not Cleveland, Ohio, we're talking Britain, baby. So this story came to light in the early 19th century. Apparently, a group of farmers were out hunting hares when they ran into Nanny X, a well-known witch in the area. She told them that she would tell them where a huge hare was, but that they should not set a black dog on it to kill it. Very specific instructions, but they agreed. She then pointed out a massive brush where of course there was a hare underneath. The hare started running for the hills, and of course the farmers went off after it. Just as the hare finally reached Nanny X's cottage, a massive demon hellhound appeared out of thin air, snapping the hare's legs and taking a massive bite out of its leg. Distraught, the hunters went to her cottage to apologize for letting the black dog get the hare, but when they went inside they found her half dead in bed with a massive lump out of her thigh, exactly where the hellhound had bit the hare. And finally, at number 1 is Black Annis, aka Black Annie. First mentioned in a title deed back in 1764, Annie was a witch that apparently lived in a cave known as Black Annie's Bower. The cave has since been lost to erosion and was supposedly built over for housing after World War I. Looks-wise, she had a grimy blue face, long arms that she used to reach through windows and snatch people's kids, and claws made of iron like she could slice a head clean off. Hide your kids, hide your wife. She would go around Leicestershire haunting locals and looking for animals or children to eat. Once she'd kidnapped a child, she would drain them of all their blood, then drape their skin on the tree outside her cave. Then she'd wait for the skin to dry out before adding it to her skirt that was already made from kids of murdered past.
Number 10.
the deer do. I always find it fascinating how we can find similar breadcrumbs around the world that depict legends of vampires. The Celtic depiction of the vampire is the deer do, and the story behind her is heartbreaking. The deer do once was a breathtaking, beautiful woman who had given her love to an innocent farm boy. But her father was greedy and arranged her to marry an abusive chieftain for wealth and land. No amount of begging could save her from her fate, and unfortunately, the marriage went through. After the wedding day, the woman fell into a deep depression, not eating or drinking until her body wasted away. Her lost love visited the grave every single day, wishing her to return, but come the year anniversary of her death, it was revenge that brought her back. She went straight to her father's bed and sucked the life from him. Not yet sated, she went of course to her brutal husband, and finding him surrounded by women in lustful acts, flew into a rage and not only sucked out his soul, but drained all the blood from his body. Every year on the anniversary of her death, she rises to seduce young men before devouring their blood. So, to this day, on the anniversary of her death in Waterford, people place rocks on her grave so she cannot rise from the earth. But sometimes, if the rocks aren't heavy enough, the deer do escapes, seeking to sate her bloodlust. Number 9, the Dullahan. The Dullahan is a foreboding headless horseman who's set to ride during festival days. He is said to be one of the most terrifying creatures who resides in the spirit world. Some consider him the angel of death. He rides a jet black stallion, and his flowing black cape blazes behind him while he rides. But his head does not sit on his shoulders, but is held in his hand. It is said that his eyes can see for miles at night, but the most terrifying thing about him is if you see him. If you don't avert your eyes as he rides past, you may get struck by a bucket of blood, or lose sight in one of your eyes. But beware if his steed begins to slow and approach you, for if he stops before you and calls your name, your soul will be sucked from your body. His only weakness is gold, so instead of trying to outrun him, carry a piece of gold in your pocket to ward him off. You know, just because everybody has gold, I guess. Number 8, speaking of creatures you don't want to encounter at night, next up we have the Banshee. The Banshee can appear in many forms, so some say she appears as a beautiful woman in a shroud, or a headless naked hag holding a bucket of blood. But even more terrifying than her appearance is her song. The Banshee is an omen of death and is said to appear to warn of violent death, either of a loved one or for the listener. Some Banshees even do the killing themselves, while other legends say they are spirits tied to their loved ones and sing songs of care and concern for the ones about to pass. At one time in Ireland, it was considered blasphemous not to believe in Banshees, and some older generations still believe to this day. Real or superstition, the legend of the Banshee is a haunting story of an inescapable fate. Number 7, Balor and the Evil Eye. Balor was a legendary ancient being who existed long before the Tuatha De Danann, a race of godlike people with supernatural powers. When Balor was a young man, he spied on his father and his druids as they performed a spell to lay waste to the land. Vapors from the spell infected his eye, enlarging it and granting it the power of death. Balor himself was said to be enormous, so large in fact that it took 4 men to lift his eyelid open for use. Whatever met his gaze would wither and die, including grass, trees, and even turn men to stone. But on the same day he was created, the druids prophesied he would be killed by his grandson. So, of course, he locked his daughter away. But of course, someone snuck in, had 3 babies with her, and though Balor drowned 2 of them, the third snuck away and finally killed him one day in battle. Number 6, the Kelpie, also known as the Nope Horse. This is the creature grannies warn their grandchildren about to keep them away from the water. And no, I'm not talking about the Australian dog breed. That's adorable. Kelpies are horses that linger near rivers and bodies of water that seem harmless at first, but if you try and ride them, you will stick to them and they will drag you to the depths to consume you, like a sticky horse. But if horses don't tempt you, they also can appear as beautiful women to lure you in with their feminine wiles. Or they can appear as hairy humanoids that wait in trees and leap on unsuspecting travelers and smash them. Depictions of these creatures are absolutely terrifying, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to be dragged underwater by a very sticky horse. They can also summon up sudden floods and rapids to drown unsuspecting victims. However, Kelpies do have a weak spot. If you do find them disguised as horses, if you get a hold of their bridle, it must serve you, giving you the strength and stamina of over 10 horses. Number 5, Carmen. If you're keeping track of evil witches, make sure to add this woman to your list. Carmen was an evil witch who terrorized the land along with her 4 sons: darkness, evil, and violence. Yeah. She placed a vicious blight on the crops of Ireland until the gods of Tuatha De Danann brought their magic against her. They drove her sons across the sea and imprisoned her, but were tasked with throwing a festival in her name each year, otherwise the land would be faced with a blight. Carmen reportedly died of grief in 600 BCE, and the festival is held every 3 years on August 1st. Number 4. The Fae. If you're already a fan of Irish folklore, then you may already be familiar with imps or the Fae. And the reasons why we fear them. Fairy lore, I think, is the next vampire craze. They're mysterious, immortal, powerful, and very sexy. What else could you want? But you may want to think twice before wandering into the woods hoping for some handsome Fae man to take you away. Probably not a good idea. Anyone who knows the lore of the Fae will warn you not to take them lightly. They love to mess with mortals and are notoriously known for stealing babies in the dead of night to replace them with possessed changelings. Though they could sometimes be friendly, they often look for ways to trick you. So, if you do want to get on their good side, here are a few very important rules to follow. Number 1, do not call them fairy. It is an insult. Call them good neighbor, imp, elf, or Seelie White. Number 2, always turn your socks inside out when going for a hike. The imps will not be able to lead you astray and make you impossibly lost. Number 3, if they offer you food, deny it. It's a sure way to become trapped in the fairy realm. But like, if that's what you want, I mean, do it. Though I would expect some torment if you do, so probably don't. Number 4, never lie to them. They will never lie to you, but they have a way of twisting words. But if you want respect, you gotta give respect. Number 5, if you accept a gift, you must give one greater in return, but do not say thank you. It means you owe whatever they ask in return. And lastly, number 6, carry iron or salt with you to protect against the darker imps. Anyways, there is a couple tips for you, but if you do come across one, don't brag about it. They hate that. Number 3, the Dark Man. Now, I mentioned that some imps are mischievous and even dangerous, but there is one being even they fear, the Dark Man. He who lurks, he who stalks, the Dark Druid. Even whispering his name invites his attention. So let's hope I'm not in trouble here, guys. Some say he's a shadow man with malevolent powers. Others say he serves the Queen of the Cid coldly and without remorse, claiming anyone she calls for. Those he took were never heard from again. The fact that our good neighbors fear him so much is enough to say that we should too, especially considering the story of the taking of Finn's wife. The Dark Man fell in love with a beautiful woman who spurned his love, so of course he cursed her by turning her into a fawn. The only way she could be released was if she found her true love, and that she did. Once she entered the house of the wise Finn McCool, she was safe. For years they lived together until Finn went off to battle. When he returned home, he discovered that she'd been deceived and taken by the Dark Druid who appeared in his likeness. Finn never saw her again. Number 2, the Avatar. Some may know Vlad the Impaler as the main inspiration for the character of Dracula, but considering Bram Stoker's Irish heritage, the origins of this famous villain may have been closer to home. The Irish king Avertoch ruled between Dungiven and Garva and was abhorred by his people. But despite his awful reputation, his name isn't that intimidating. It's actually an old Irish name that means deaf fellow, and many believe he was also a man of small stature. Some say he was a dwarf, others say that he just lost his legs in an accident so he was shorter. He was an evil and cruel wizard, hated and feared by his clans. He was also insanely jealous and suspected his wife of having an affair. So one night he slipped out a window and tried to peer into a room to catch her in the act, but instead he slipped and fell to his death. Yay, I guess. The people, relieved to see his demise, buried him right away, standing upright in the ground as for his kingliness he needed to be. Sitting upright in the ground, which was tradition. But the next morning, he appeared demanding bowls of blood from his people, freshly poured from their wrists. The people begged a neighboring chieftain to save them, and he tried to kill him not once, but 3 times, yet still he would appear the next morning, demanding blood. The chieftain sought the advice from a neighboring saint, and this time when he killed him, he buried him upside down, stabbed him in the heart with a stake from the yew tree, piled ash wood on top of him, and placed atop the grave a heavy stone slab. You can still visit the grave to this day, but locals still fear the sight, and some have even had very eerie experiences. Ooh. Number 1. The Slua. There's one night a year that you should fear the Slua, spirits of death who show no mercy to whoever crosses their path. The only way to dissuade them from taking your soul is if you offer up another soul in return. You may know this night as Halloween, but those who believe in Celtic folklore call it Samhain. Some say they used to be imps who became twisted and warped by dark magic. It is said they fly from the west in a dark mass, seeking souls to drag back with them into the darkness. On Samhain, fires were forbidden so as not to attract them to your door, and windows on the west side of the house were locked shut. They are also locked tight if someone in the house is ill or dying, as the Slua often delight in stealing souls before they can give their last rites. But you can also call them to you by saying their name aloud. So, like, guess I'm screwed.